Hey everybody, thanks for joining me. Today I would like to discuss the band Portal. Portal are an Australian death metal band that formed in 1994. They have released 7 full-length albums at this point between 2003 and 2021. So it's been about 4.5 years since the last Portal album came out. So I would think we'd be getting some new Portal music fairly soon. I've been aware of the band since the debut album, but I bought the second album upon release. Been a fan ever since. And I need to admit, I've been listening to these albums for many years, but I'm not a musician. I'm not a reviewer. It's difficult music to talk about. So I'm just going to give a short and sweet ranking, my personal opinion, from 7 to 1. So let's start off with my last place, number 7, Hagbobia from 2021. This would be released on the same day as another full-length album that we'll get to later. So, again, this album was released in 2021, and it is basically a dark ambient album. Some vocals, some drums. From what I gather, a lot of what sounds like electronic noise on here is created by stringed instruments. And not something I listen to often. Basically, if I'm gonna decide to run through my Portal albums, and has kind of a cool atmosphere for Halloween. Put that on around the Halloween season. One time I put that on in the car, thinking, isn't really metal, maybe just some Halloween atmosphere music the kids can deal with, and I barely slowly ejected that from the car stereo, as you could imagine. But that is my number 7, Hagbobia. Number 6, Swarth, the third album from 2009. Like all the albums besides the debut, this was released on Profound Lore. So I've always considered Swarth probably the most accessible album in many ways. Portal is always going to be weird, but it just seems like the most normal death metal album to me. Number 6. Number 5, Vexavoid from 2013, the fourth album. I just got this one recently. That was kind of holding up my video. I only like to talk about music that I own, and this album I bought on MP3 back in the day. The album sold out. It was repressed very recently on Profound Lore. So it kind of brings me back to Swarth in a way that these albums are often kind of paired together as the most accessible ones. This one, it's it's different in that I think it's more catchy in many ways, but also more inaccessible in many ways. So just more of a polarizing release than Swarth, but overall more interesting. Number 5. Number 4, Avow, the 6th or 7th album, depending on how you looked at it, released on the same day as Hagbobia. This album is basically Portal sharpened to perfection, kind of firing on all cylinders, playing to all their strengths. Just to me, it's not as interesting as the top 3 albums out there. So that's bringing us into our top 3. This is the debut album, Sepia, from 2003. This album was released on Ordo Decimus Peccatum. That's really a small print there, but the only album not released on Profound Lore. This album still scares the hell out of me every time I put it on. It's just like a couple minutes of silence, and every time it surprised me when it just rips your head off out of nowhere. But this album is the most simple in some ways, because it's like kind of straightforward metal, kind of weird part. It's just not as blended and more separated into different sounds. Probably the most black metal thing they've done, which is a plus in my book. and a sign of great things to come. Number 2, Outre from 2007, the second full-length album, and I would say probably the most popular, or at least the one that's brought up the most. The thing that I really like about this is that it sounds kind of a little understated, a little dry, but it just sounds effortlessly weird. Some of the other albums really sounds like they're trying really hard to kind of twist your brain. This one, it just has just a unique atmosphere that I don't think they've quite replicated. I'm stalling on what to say. I hate to use the old cliche that sounds like it's played backwards in some parts. I do hear that. I just like how it's effortlessly weird, one of a kind, and timeless. My number 1 album kind of surprised me, but 2018's Ion, their 5th full-length album. I personally, at first, consider this kind of a commercialization of their sound. A lot of other opinions I see out there saying this is yet another level of inaccessibility. Very obvious point of conversation is the production, bright, trebly, very different than all their albums, both before and after. And yes, I was very shocked upon first hearing this album, but as the years have come on, my appreciation has just grown. I said this about a couple other albums, but in some ways, their most straightforward death metal album. The vocals on here are probably my favorite vocals of the band's discography. And along with Hagbobia, these 2 albums kind of stick out the most. You got a dark ambient one, and then a somewhat normal death metal album with strange production. But I love them all for what they are. Ion, my number 1 Portal album. Outre, my close number 2. Thanks for joining me. See you next time.